I have a very special guest here with me today. His name is Dr. Amiad Fredman. Amiad is a medical doctor from the United States, and he is active in the working in this field of digital health. And he has a very special interest in the area of video games and how video games is helping shape our mental physical health, and also the healthcare sector and the future of how video games is gonna help impact those areas. So Amiad, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about digital health and medicine and games for health. It's going to be a good time.
It's going to be a good time. This is a really special one because, we talk about a lot of the common health areas like diet and nutrition. That's a topic a lot of people deal with. However, video games and internet gaming, these areas are definitely impacting the lives of so many people. And I wish in this conversation today to debunk a lot of myths, a lot of things people, kind of take for granted about when they think about video games. And some of the things, in our last conversation, you mentioned to me a few things that I was super excited to hear, and surprised, how video games kind of help shape mental health and kind of also help train medical doctors using a lot of things that we don't know about. So, I'm going to start by asking you to tell me a little bit about where this passion for video games comes from. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. So I've been a gamer all of my life. I've played video games all of my life. Back when I was a kid and my parents had a rule of, no video game consoles allowed in the house, but my aunt had a video game console. She had a PlayStation 1 and I believe one of a Nintendo system as well. And every Friday, my brother and I would go over to her house and that was the time we were able to play video games.
Right.
And so I've grown up loving games. Eventually, I was able to get my own console. And it wasn't lost on me that there was something special about this medium of media, of entertainment.
Right.
And I always had this idea, when I was pre-med in university, even going through medical school, I always had this idea that I wanted in some way to combine both of my passions of medicine and games.
Right.
And knowing that there is this power of games, the power to escape to another world, the power to be immersed, the power to walk a mile in someone else's shoes. These are all very powerful things. And then you get into conversations, with video game technology, the graphics engine, the video game engines, the virtual reality, augmented reality, and how these things can be used to improve the field of healthcare. There's all these interesting conversations we can start having. So it's something I started to explore in medical school, and then upon graduating, decided, hey, I want to dive into this a little bit deeper. And now I'm lucky enough to be able to do that as part of my day-to-day.
Right. That's incredible. I love the transition, and I love how you linked together your two passions, medicine and gaming. That's really the magic I think happens when people are able to, link their passions and create something absolutely unique out of this. And, I heard author Stephen Kotler talk also about, how you can combine your different passions. And that's kind of in finding out your purpose in life. And people go through medical school. Some already know before what exactly they want to be, what exact specialization. But I hear a lot from, I think Brene Brown is another author who has been recently talking about, why it's important for us to keep those options open and explore our different passions and find that common link between those passions. And hearing you say that, I just absolutely love how you made those connections, and you just, stay on your path in both your passions and find that common thread. And that's incredible, I think. So, respect on that, really.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Right, man. So let me, follow that up by asking you, what is, video games? So we know video games, people are just a lot of the times playing for fun, for, pastime. However, what I learned from you is the different areas of use case, like in medical field, in a lot of different specialties, it is being used to train doctors. And you also mentioned how this could be used to for mental training and different kinds of training for mental health, for physical health. So could you maybe give me a few examples of how video games can be so beneficial in so many different ways?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I think it makes sense to kind of start to break down what makes a good video game, and it depends on sort of what your goal is, what you want to accomplish. I think in general, video games by design do a fantastic job of engaging the player or the user, right? And that's something they need to do, right? Whether it's intentional or not, a good video game is going to compel the player to keep on going, to keep on pushing forward.
Yeah.
So they engage the player.
Right.
And in medicine, this is something that we aren't really so good at doing.
Yeah.
Medical professionals in general haven't quite cracked the patient experience yet and how to connect to the patient at home. So this is why I'm so excited in the broader field of digital health, because it allows us as medical professionals to provide the patient with a attractive tool set that they can use at home, and that if done right, hopefully we could even engage with the patient even when they're not in front of our office. But still, we have the problem, we always talk about patient compliance. And, you give, I was just having a conversation the other day with a colleague of mine, and we were talking about diabetes and peripheral artery disease, and how, some of these patients have very serious cases, but still aren't completing their management protocols and their treatment regimens. And he said, if someone showed me a picture of a amputated foot, a foot missing all of their toes because they lost them due to vascular disease, he's like, that would be enough for me to every day for the rest of my life make sure I'm doing what I need to be doing to avoid that. And I said, you'd think that'd be true, but that isn't necessarily always the case. So even in these extreme cases, we struggle to connect with the patient, to convince the patient enough to like, hey, you need to keep doing this. So video games are really good at keeping the user engaged. So if we could learn from what they're doing so right and apply that to medicine, then there's a thought, and I think a good one, that, hey, maybe we could improve patient compliance on that side. So that's one area that I'm really, really interested in, and that I think could be applied to a lot of different use cases. You mentioned also, training for doctors. This is also a really cool thing, a very different subject as well. We have different goals there, but the objective there is still to engage the learner, right? To make learning fun. And there's some really great companies. A company that I contract for is called Level X, which is a studio based out of Chicago with fantastic video game talent, fantastic medical talent. And they're really making very, very fun games where you learn about new innovative treatments or procedures, but you're actually playing these out and enjoying yourself. And then they say, it's a game first, but as a byproduct, you're actually learning these medical topics as well. So there's countless. I mean, I could keep listing and listing and listing, but I'll let you jump in with a follow-up if you want to dive in any deeper to any specific area.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I find it really fascinating what you just said about people really engaging in games. So it really, takes up all of your attention. And I previously mentioned Stephen Kotler. He's one of the authors. He's also a researcher who is talking a lot about flow state. So he has several books where he goes very deep. He, deep dives into the topic of flow state and how immersing in one task at a time can really, give you this sense of timelessness, of of being really in the zone.
That's right.
And I have heard a lot of people experience that, talk about this experience while really playing in games that really engage their full attention. So maybe you, as the video games and video games expert and medical doctor, maybe you could tell me a little bit more about the gaming aspect of this really powerful state of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you brought it up. So flow is a really interesting concept. Flow state, exactly as you described it, is kind of thought. It's that moment when you're in the zone, right? You're the athlete on the basketball court. You have the ball in hand, going for the 3-pointer. It's the end of the game, and you're just focused. It's considered by experts to be a feeling of optimal motivation.
Yeah.
So you think about as a learner, and to be honest, there's many different times where you can feel flow. And the other part that you mentioned so correctly was the other component of flow is this feeling of timelessness.
Right.
That time is just passing, and you're almost not aware of it. And there's many times when I think people can feel this. Actually, I can think of many times that I was in a flow state, even back in medical school when I was studying for an exam, when I'm just in the groove and things are working, and I'm going through a method that is just working for me. And all of a sudden, I look at my watch and like 4 hours have passed, and I'm like, oh wow, like it's the end of the day. Got to pack it up and go home. So there's times even in learning where you can be in a flow state, even in the traditional learning, at least in my experience. But video games, certainly designers attempt to put you in a state of flow. So flow is that, if you imagine, an X and Y axis, flow is that perfect middle slope between, boredom on the bottom and maybe anxiety on the top. So, you're moving at a rate that, it's challenging enough so you're not bored, but it's not too challenging that you're stressed. So game designers can try to do this, but often it just happens as a result of someone playing the game. As you get into this zone and you're enjoying yourself, and there's a challenge, and you keep progressing, and the challenge gets a little bit harder as you progress, and this keeps you moving through. And then I think you talk to anyone who plays games, and they'll certainly be familiar with that feeling of like, oh my God, I've been playing for 3 hours. Where did the time go?
Right. Right.
But the interesting thing is, I mean, certainly there's some, I think, positive effects just for, being in a state like that. Certainly it is associated with positive emotions and a healthy mental state, I would say.
Mhm.
But like I said, as a learner, to be able to put yourself or to be put into that state more often, and to be engaged in that way, it's the optimal state to be in for learning. So to tap into that resource would be really valuable.
Right, right. Absolutely. So, you know, f- when gaming kind of gets you to that, really powerful state of mind, I mean, there are several studies that have confirmed how powerful being in flow state can be. I think there was a Harvard Business School study that showed people had like really the benefits of being in flow, which is higher productivity and higher
Right.
creativity, that those benefits last for several days after being in flow state for one time. So those people who were able to enter a flow, they really performed well for a really longer period of time. And then there was another McKinsey study that showed flow kind of 10x the productivity of their employees, which are really powerful results, right? And you hear all these anecdotal stories from people who have entered flow, and there are thousands of those people who say that they really we're able to tap into creativity and really powerful states of mind just by entering flow. And if you know video games, what I'm very curious to know from you is, are there certain types of video games? Because there are, when we talk in general about video games, there are like so many, thousands of different types of video games. And when I really want to kind of tap into flow, is there anything special that kind of allows me to do that? What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it really comes down as a tribute to the game designers. It's video games, I think you can slip into a flow state, but when it's really done well, it's something that is very intentional, and it comes from that difficulty scaling in a game. That's not so easy to master, again, because you make a game too challenging, someone's not going to want to play it, or the mass majority of people, because it's just not fun. It's too hard. And like I said, on the other hand, if it's not hard enough, it's not going to be fun because it's not a challenge. So there are exceptions to that rule, right? And I actually think that's really interesting to explore. So there's certain games that are built now, games like Dark Souls or Bloodborne, and some of these Souls-like games, as they're known, that are very, very challenging. And I would say you are not, in that perfect area of flow. You're past it. You're in that almost anxiety to challenging way, but it works because how the game is designed, as you're playing, you are seeing yourself, you're failing over and over and over, but you are seeing yourself get better. And as you're failing, you're learning. And what games can do so amazingly is they can make failing fun. And this is something that I love about video games. And I think that educational systems can learn a lot from video games, is how to make failing fun. In traditional education, we're taught from a very early age that failing is a bad thing, but it's so not true. Failing is a natural part of the learning process, and we should be encouraged to fail. And that's what these games, especially these Souls-like games that are extra challenging, do so well, is that failing is designed. You are not going to play that game and not fail over and over and over. I was just playing a game called Celeste, which is actually a mini sequel to the game. It's one of my favorite impactful games for a majority of reasons, but one of them being because of how well they teach you about the learning process, and how well they work that difficulty curve. And I was playing it on stream, actually, on Twitch, and I definitely was, there are times where I was failing, and I'm like, okay, I get what I need to do, and times when I would slip a little too frustrated, and I literally would want to pull my hair out. But at the end of the day, I would progress, and it was the best feeling, because it just reinforced that feeling, as even though something feels impossible, I will figure it out. And that actually has been something that I probably have learned, at least partially through games, that has really been something very important in my life, to know that doesn't matter what the challenge is, I could figure it out if I work hard enough.
Yeah. So that learning kind of translates into other areas of your life as well, right? To that drive, to that grit to overcome challenges. And I really love that. So what I also want to know from you is, you being a medical doctor and, really an expert into different kinds of games, and also the psychological aspects, the different, difficulty level aspects. I also know that a lot of people tend to associate games with also, kind of addiction patterns and, dopamine rush and that kind of dopamine addiction, that kind of stuff. But I do know there are two different sides of a coin, and there are many different ways to explain this. But there is also that aspect, which probably a lot of people already deal with, like kind of, dopamine addiction and, just spending a lot of time on the screen, which they could otherwise be doing, using to do other things which are maybe bringing them more direct results in terms of their career and stuff like that. So do tell me, Amiad, what's your take on this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, right. So I think it was my first or second year in med school. So it was like 4 or 5 years ago that the DSM-5 came out. And I remember, it was a big deal, certainly in the gaming community, but even reaching into the medical community, that there's this new diagnosis, internet gaming disorder. And it sort of caused a big stir. And from what I understand from psychiatrists and professional psychologists, is the majority of them aren't too crazy about the definition and the disorder. And I think the reason is anything can be addicting. And when something crosses that line into, what are the patterns that we are worried about with addiction, is it starts to impact your daily life, your needs. It gets in the way of, your work, the things you need to do. It starts obstructing your mind. It starts being, forget the word. It's the best word to describe it. It'll come to me. But anything can be dangerous if used too much. And it also, it depends on the person using it. And certainly in the games, I think the more interesting conversation is there a responsibility on the developer side to make it so you're not putting in predatory practices that, loot boxes have been a popular topic of conversation that might slip into that area that maybe more people are prone to get quote unquote addicted to. So I think certainly the risk is there. But not necessarily more so than other areas. Again, it is an interesting conversation to have about, since this is more of an immersive, engaging medium than something else, is it more likely that you can become addicted? But generally, the studies have found that, it's sort of the same as other areas. Does that answer that part of the question?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So from what I understand is you think, a lot of it is individual, how you're going to treat the gaming, because potentially every entertaining activity people engage in could have an potential for addiction if like you said, too much of nothing is good. For me, it does absolutely make sense. And I like the way you kind of, put that aspect out there, that it's not completely different from anything else that we do. And for me, that explanation works. Moving on to also the learning side, which we were discussing previously. I know you talked about, how this could patient compliance, how you could use gaming to find out, where areas in which patients are, doing really well, and kind of use that feedback to, help them, be really healthy. However, I'm interested also to know what's your take on like different kinds of games to teach people, especially mental health. Are there any potentials? And if there is any concrete areas where these are already being used? Can you tell me something about that maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So certainly this is something I could always talk about, but even more so post, 2020, post, pandemic.
Right.
This is something that I think has exploded in popularity. So the game Animal Crossing launched for the Nintendo Switch in 2020. And it's, for anyone who doesn't know, sort of this sweet, charming game where you play as a little guy or girl on an island, and basically just start customizing your island and meeting these little animals that live there and doing tasks for them and getting resources. And then you can build your own house and your own furniture and your own gardens and all things like that. So in 2020, where the world is on fire, this game just took off beyond expectations because everyone flocked to the idea of living in this little paradise, where nothing goes wrong. And I think something as simple as that we see from that popularity and the conversations around that game, that there is such a mental health, it's so pro mental health to engage in something like that. And I think part of it comes from that idea of escapism and the ability to sort of, put, I don't want to say put your real life on hold necessarily, but to be able to dive into a new world, and sort of, put stressors on hold. Why not? And again, this can be done, to an extreme, maybe where it wouldn't be healthy, but I think the mass, majority of people do this in a healthy way. And so that's certainly, that escapism, part of it can certainly be pro mental health. There are also games that are, and more so, that explore the topic of mental health in really powerful ways. So there's this game that I played this past year, came out in 2019, but it's called Kind Words. And the game is just you as an avatar sitting in a little room listening to some, relaxing music. And you're receiving letters from real people, all anonymous, that are just, people looking for help with certain life problems, or people sending messages of support. And you also can send out your, letters of support. And you'll be sitting there, and it's this community that you're just a part of when you're playing these games. So the social impact that you can have from playing these games as well can be really, really positive. And then the last, example I'll say is, a game I mentioned, Celeste, but another reason that game is one of my favorite impactful games is because how it explores the topic of mental health. And the main character you play as, Madeline, she suffers from some, I would say, pretty severe anxiety. And the way they approach that topic and show that topic and actually incorporate the feeling of anxiety into the gameplay itself, so that it actually affects how you're playing, I think is really wonderful. And you walk away from a game like that, I think, really understanding what it is like to, if let's say you don't suffer from severe anxiety, to be someone who would suffer from that, or if you do suffer from anxiety, to actually relate to the character, to build a connection and maybe even learn something about yourself in the process. So I think there's a lot of interesting angles to explore.
Yeah, yeah. That's really interesting. I mean, love the different examples you just gave. And can you tell me, like you told me, you've recently shared with me that you are working in a project to build up your own company that is also active in the digital health space. So I would like to know a little more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I am the co-founder and chief medical officer of Aegis Digital Health, which is a company that sets out really to do two things. The first is to instill a little bit more, bring a little bit more collaboration to the field of digital health, and really to the startup world. It's so difficult for entrepreneurs and, new startups, and in the digital health side, certainly, physicians or researchers who come up with technologies and products. It's so difficult for them to scale their businesses to become more than just a product, and to actually become a successful company. And you see that there's all these startups, out there in the digital health space that are all trying to do the same thing. And so you have all these different companies all doing the same thing on their own, whether it's trying to attract the same customers, trying to get into the hospital systems, trying to create, back-end support to get into electronic medical records, trying to, put in telehealth platforms. And everyone's out there trying to figure it out on its own. So one of the ideas of Aegis was, hey, could we create a infrastructure where we bring in some of these startups that we think are attractive, and actually can share some of the resources from one portfolio company to another. Say, hey, we have this company over here that's doing this, has this great platform. We want to basically allow you to utilize this platform too, or maybe it's billing support, maybe it's a physician network for contracting, whatever it is. But really open up this dialogue for collaboration that I think will make the path to market for these companies really more efficient and streamlined. So that's the first kind of component of Aegis. The second component is similar, right? So like I said, it's very difficult for companies to, for startups to take their products and actually make successful companies out of them. I'm lucky enough to be joined by some incredible team members and co-founders at Aegis who have really are just veterans in the area, have a long proven track record of success in digital health and medical technology in bringing companies to market, acquiring customers, having successful exits in the space. And what we do is we take our team and we put them all in on a product. So if we partner with a company, we're a commercialization partner. So we work with companies hand in hand, but really drive their commercializations, drive their customer acquisition, drive their sales, drive their marketing, and we have the expertise to do that. So for a young company, or again, researcher or physician with a product, I think that's I'm hoping we'll see that's a great resource to be able to tap into. So. And for me, it allows me to continue working with many different digital health startups, which I love, and explore the space even more. And of course, I'm a product guy. So product and medicine is my specialty. And of course, this is hand in hand with the Games for Health. I'll always be thinking of, how can we increase that patient engagement? How can we increase that physician engagement even, and put the two together? So certainly the Games for Health will slip into this as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. So, you're working at the very forefront of this digital health kind of movement that we see happening now. I want to know from you, how do you see the digital health space change in the next 10 years? Because we see a lot more telemedicine, post pandemic, now, excuse me, during the pandemic. And but we have seen also progress to be quite slow in the past few decades in the digital health space. A lot in everyday medicine is still today, brick and mortar. Like, physicians still have to do an incredible amount of paperwork, and still not, everything not as digitalized as we would like to see it. How do you see this changing in the next, few years?
Yeah, it's a great question. So COVID certainly, popularity-wise, usage-wise, adoption-wise, financially, really propelled the field of digital health 10 years into the future. I'm not just saying that. I mean, really, it really did. And there's no signs of that slowing. I think the changes that we've had to make as a society, all over the world, are not going anywhere. They'll always stay around to some degree. Remote work is going to be around to some degree, and certainly telehealth and virtual care solutions are going to continue to be around. Certain things happened in this past year that will continue to reinforce that. For example, there are several new remote patient monitoring reimbursement codes that now physicians can get reimbursed for monitoring patients remotely, which is something that was a lot more challenging to do in the past. So that's something that's there now and set up that will allow for these innovations to continue. So I think you're going to see remote patient monitoring continue to grow in the next 10 years. I also think, certainly wearable tech is something that you're going to see grow as well alongside with it. And what are the areas where we need to fill in so that we can, get as much information from the patients at home as we do in the clinic. And I think that's going to continue to be the focus. So I think those two things, the data and the reimbursement, the remote patient monitoring through those reimbursement codes, I think really that's where you're going to see a large focus. The other part I would say is certain areas. I hope to see insurance companies be able to work in be able to provide solutions in behavioral health, in aging, in women's health, some of these areas that are growing now and that are becoming more of a focus. And another area that I'm very passionate about is virtual reality and augmented reality. There seems to be a lot more popularity in these areas as well. And I think these will continue to grow, especially as the headsets become more affordable, as they become more streamlined, as the technology continues to grow. There's a lot of really amazing initiatives that are being born out of those technologies. But the missing piece there is the insurance companies. We need the insurance companies to be able to reimburse for these technologies, to be able to get these technologies in the hands of patients or employers or employees, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. Love that. So you already mentioned the missing piece seem to be the funding, the insurance companies, the financial side. What are some of the biggest challenges? The insurance companies side, also, the various changes we're seeing already, and for those to become even stronger changes and really lasting solutions, what are your, in your opinion, some of the biggest, toughest challenges we have to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, I think the insurance is certainly a big one. Anytime you try to get a new solution, a new technology adopted, there's going to be some resistance on both sides of the table. There's going to be resistance on the patient side. There'll be resistance on the provider side of things. So I think on the provider side of things, these new reimbursement codes certainly help a lot because, strictly from a financial point of view, it makes a lot of these solutions a lot more attractive. I think as, you talk about the next 10 years, as you start to see our healthcare system transition to a value-based care system, which it's slowly making its way towards, you'll also start to see more adoption of these technologies that can speak to the long-term outcomes that some of these technologies can provide. Other than that, I think it goes back to what we talked about in the very beginning of the interview, which is in the engagement side of things. I think, in 2021, medicine is so much broader than just, it's happening in so many more places than just inside the hospital, and for so many different types of people as well. So you're going to need collaboration from many different types of workers, and really this multidisciplinary effort. So you have doctors like me working outside of the hospital. I think that'll start to become more popular and something that needs to happen for these things to catch on, to eliminate these barriers. At the same time, you need our tech friends. We need to open up our arms for them as well, to move into this space as well and really work together. So I know I'm combining sort of the last two questions, but I think these are things that you're going to see more and more often, but also certain things that you're going to need to see in order for some of these barriers to decrease.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's incredible. I love that. So I want to know, like, what are you excited about for the future? What are your big plans and hopes and dreams for the future?
Oh my God, yeah. Well, I'm careful to set out any road path set in stone, because I know, if you asked me, I guess 4.5 years ago, where I'd be right now, I'd say I'd be in my first year of residency. So I know that plans can change based on, just kind of how your life rolls out. But that being said, I'm really happy about the path that I'm on right now. I'm thrilled that I'm able to have this position at Aegis and be able to really work on the forefront of digital health. And I'm thrilled that I get to continue to consult for Games for Health companies, and continue to create content around games for health through my own podcast and content channel, digital.games. So I think my plan is to continue, and my hopes and dreams for the future is to continue really on all three of these paths. I have no intention of leaving Aegis. I think that's where my heart is right now. That's where we're going to see opportunity. I think we're going to make great change in digital health. I have no intention in stopping my Games for Health consulting. I hope to work with more companies, more we didn't really get into digital therapeutics so much, but more companies that are, bringing games actually for the treatment of diseases. I would love to even work with game studios that are exploring the topics of health in their games. And then certainly for digital.games, for my content channel, I would love to continue to see that grow, to see that to be something that, I could dedicate more resources to bring in more medical professionals who are passionate about the connection between gaming and health, to get them involved, to get them on the channel, to get them interviewing people. So I think that, I don't know, just in general, I don't know where I'm going to end up, but I'm excited for it.
Right. Amiad, I'm very excited to see how your different incredibly exciting projects, go. And I think you and I have a lot also in common in terms of, our passion about digital health and, your interest in gaming and how this interaction, these immersive experiences affect mental health and the brain health side of things. Has a lot of synergy with the work I'm doing at Brainvincible, my company. We work with neurofeedback and are also working on the forefront of that technological innovation. So also digital health is one of our focuses and interests. So I would not be surprised if we end up collaborating and
absolutely
sharing our experiences and taking these incredible ideas further. So I'm very excited about the future.
100%. No, I could see us working together a lot in that way. Certainly professionally, but also just, absolutely to keep in touch. And, if there is anything I can do to help you out, and certainly I'll ping you as well. But I think when you meet someone, and I think it was clear the first time that we met that we share this, when you meet someone who shares your passion in this way, it's so great to keep that connection alive.
Absolutely, 100%, man. So, when people want to learn more about what you're doing and also view your the amazing content that you're creating, where can they find you?
Absolutely. So everyone can follow my personal Twitter at digital.md. And my content channel, digital.games. You can follow there on Twitter at digital.games, or it's basically anything /digital.games. So YouTube is the best place, youtube.com/digital.games, where I post all my interviews with experts in the games industry and in the medical industry who are combining the two, as well as some fun videos of me reviewing or playing impactful games.
Right.
Also, you could search on your go-to podcast platform. I post my interviews there every week. So, good chance if you Google it, you'll find where you want to follow. But I hope to, see some of your listeners come to my channel. Hope to see some of my listeners come to your channel, because I think there's a lot of common grounds.
Absolutely. There's a lot of synergy. Amiad, so I really want to thank you a lot for taking the time to be on this show today. And, that was absolutely incredible for me. And I'm pretty sure the viewers are going to find this really interesting as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And if you've stuck around and you've listened to me rant for this long until the very end of the episode, thank you for allowing me to do that and hanging in there.